walkout music. That's nice. Thanks for that. Okay, good stuff. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, everybody. Thank you. So hello. As mentioned, my name is David Astor. Thank you so much for having me today and attending my talk. As mentioned, I am a Solutions Architect Manager at Gitlab, and I've been with Gitlab for just over 5.5 years now. Always in the role of a solution architect, and in the last 2.5 years in the role of a manager, managing a great team of folks at GitLab. So for those unfamiliar with the role, a solutions architect is part of the pre-sales motion where we are the technical counterparts essentially to the sales team. And it puts us in a unique position to be the front line hearing from customers, prospects about the journeys that they're on. Now, prior to GitLab, I was in a similar role at a company called Version 1. Version 1 specialized in agile project planning. We're competing against the likes of Rally Dev, Jira Align, actually back when it was called Greenhopper, actually, so I'm dating myself a little bit there. So over my 13 years in the pre-sales role, I've worked with numerous organizations assisting in their agile transformations, and now with GitLab, DevSecOps transformations. And it's a wonderful role that I'm in because I really enjoy listening to folks, hearing their experiences and what they're going through and figuring out where we can possibly help. Now, also, I really enjoy board games. Those are some of my favorites up there. I'm a huge fan of college football, especially the Florida State Seminoles. I know I'm in Miami, so I'll say it slower, Florida State Seminoles. I also own a cheetah suit that I would love to wear today, but alas, it is at the dry cleaners. So, as you saw from the title slide, we're going to be talking about maintaining agility and security without impacting the developer experience. Now, that's really a mouthful, but I wanted to start with that last word, experience, right? So, how do we know something is a good experience? So let's go ahead and, actually, I'm going to back that up. Let's show of hands in the room. Who has had a truly awful experience? Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be a software experience. It could be a bad experience for buying a car or breaking up with someone. So no one's here? No one? I'm looking at hands. No, a couple of bad experiences. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm assuming that some hands went up because we've all had a bad experience, right? We all know when something doesn't feel right. We know when something's been wrong. We know when we've been wronged. And some of these experiences are so ingrained in our heads that it prevents us from actually using certain products again or going to certain places. I'll never go to that restaurant again because they messed up my order so terribly. Or maybe you bought a blender that only lasted 2 days and never again, random blender company. Or in my case, I'll never drink Southern Comfort liquor again because, well, reasons. Actually, even just searching for that particular bottle during this for this presentation brought back so many bad memories. So there's actually a ton of psychology behind this. And one of my favorite things I read while I was preparing for this particular this talk came from an author, Jennifer Gastelum, where she pointed out that our brains are actually hardwired through evolution to hold on to the negative memories, right? And if primitive man, the reason why this is primitive man was able to be more attuned to the danger and the negative stimuli in their environment, they would stay alive longer and be able to pass on their genes. So focusing on that bad, on that negative, actually developed as a way of our brains to keep us safe. That's pretty interesting there. So if you've heard of this new social media fad that the kids are talking about, you'll probably see a lot of people sharing their negative experiences. And because our brains hold that information for so much longer, it's the main reason why customers are more inclined to write a negative review. It's constantly with them, right? They're more likely to write a negative review than a positive one. There's actually another great quote from Dr. Rick Hansen, and he says, "Our brain has a negativity bias associated with it, which makes it like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for the good experiences." So people are also, they share the bad experiences with more people than they will a positive experience. And it all has to do with having this heightened emotional response to it. Your brain actually takes it as a personal affront that something bad is happening to it, right? The stats that you see here are all based on a study done regarding customer experiences at mid-sized companies. You can see 95%, almost all of the people who took the survey said they would share the bad experience, whereas only 87% would share the good. More than half said they would share that experience with more than 5 people, while only about a third said they would share the good experience with more than 5 people, and about 45% shared their bad experience on social media. They want to get that word out there, tell their friends and family or whoever, shout it into the wind, while only 30% shared the good experiences on social media. All right, so my point, and the reason why I bring this up, is that we have to know what bad experiences feel like so we can appreciate the good ones. There's a Chinese proverb that says something like, eat bitter first, get sweet later. I'm probably paraphrasing that. Maybe a more modern one is no pain, no gain, something along those lines, right? You have to understand what the bad feels like in order to get to the good. So enough with the Psych 101. Let's go ahead and get into the good stuff. Let's tie this back to the title and get on with the developer experience. Now, earlier I asked you if you've had any awful experience at all. But let's go ahead and narrow that focus down and discuss bad developer experiences. And when talking with lots of customers that I have over the years, there's some commonalities that come from this question of, what are things that could negatively impact the software or the processes that you currently use on a regular basis. And you'll see things like a complex or confusing UI. It's great that you've got those amazing fluffy colored cloud icons in your application, but is that really helping somebody navigate to where they go to? Again, poor navigation is a reason. Lack of consistency is a bad example, a bad experience. Bad examples or documentation, old technology, outdated technology, too much friction in the pipeline or the tools you're using, poor communication amongst the teams. These are just some of the ones we see. And by the way, when I was preparing for this, I don't know why I laughed so hard about that one with the month being in alphabetical order. That's just amazing to me. That's a terrible experience, but I thought it was funny. So let's focus on a few of these. When we talk about technology, it's progressing so very fast. Look where we are today with things like AI and ML. As I'm talking, it's progressing even more and more, right? The tools that developers are becoming obsolete over time. And new and better ones are getting released. Maybe ones that you know and love no longer have support for them. I worked with one team that was so reliant on legacy pipelines legacy applications, that they could not upgrade their application, this tier 1 application they were working on, for fear of breaking the entire tool chain. And so putting the onus of maintaining legacy code on developers and admins can severely impact their day-to-day work, and that makes for a terrible experience. Now, when there's lack of consistency or guidelines on how to do things, teams are going to likely come up with different approaches based on their specific team or goals or the projects they're working on. You may be familiar with the term the Wild West. With groups doing their own things, it's going to be incredibly frustrating for new developers trying to onboard or transition onto that team. Common templates, centralized documentation with how processes are performed make for a much better experience. And better yet, you should make that documentation editable editable by everyone, so if something new comes along, they can make a change on that. Or if a better way of solving an issue is found, they can actually update the documentation so everyone's aware of that. Now, I'm not saying that everyone just goes in and makes change willy-nilly. No, there should be checks on that to make sure there's an approval process, but making that documentation editable for all is going to make things a lot easier. Poor communication. The old mumbling presenter joke? All right, so when you've got poor communication, as you just experienced me doing this, it causes so many issues, right? How many emails, how many instant messages, how many bad games of telephone do you have to have before problems are actually solved? Again, I've worked with organizations that don't allow communications from developers to project managers or even higher up in the business because there's chains of command that things need to go through. It prevents messaging from getting from those people in a timely manner. Now, to be truly agile, you need to have free and open communication paths from top to bottom. Not doing so causes delays and incorrect assumptions and even incorrect implementations, which is terrible. And finally, one of the items that I mentioned on that list that makes a poor developer experiences was too much friction. So I'm going to spend a little bit more talking about that. Now, to set this up, it's believed that in a world where software defines the speed of innovation, you have to be great at three things: developing, securing, and deploying software. You have to be experts in all three of those, or you're going to find yourself on the outside looking in to those that are actually doing them. Now, there's a big caveat here, right? You see it there in the purple. This is especially true in our current economic climate. You have to do all three of these things while cutting costs, while being more efficient, and essentially doing more with less. I'm sure there are many of you that have heard that same type of messaging in your organizations. Look around, you're probably not alone with that, right? The last few years during the pandemic were so cruel in many ways. And two particular industries where this was especially true was hospitality and travel industries. No one was taking flights. No one was staying in hotels, cruise ships that we saw in the dock over there, right? In hospitality alone, nearly 8 million jobs were lost, and that's terrible to think about. Absolutely for those that lost their jobs or let go, but also for those that kept their jobs, because we heard stories about what's called layoff survivor's guilt. On one team, basically, why am I still here? Why did everyone else let go, right? This is a real thing. In one team, I work with a team from an international hotel chain. Their team of 10 went down to a team of 3 during that. But yet they still had to build, they still had to secure, and they still had to deploy their products. So when we hear stories like that, it's important that these organizations learn to be as agile as they can be. They have to remove bottlenecks from that process to ensure that these teams can still compete. That's still paramount for them. And as a side note, actually, I was happy to hear that 4 of those developers that did let go from that company and that team, they eventually got their jobs back, so hooray for them. That's a good little story there. Now, one of the 3 things that I mentioned a moment ago was security. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, so this is something controversial. I want to say it, so just pay attention, Shift Miami. Here we go. You've got to secure your code. That's right. That's right. That's crazy, right? Now, to quote the great Ferris Bueller, I believe he said something like, securing your code is so choice. If you have the means, I highly recommend doing it. Maybe I watched the movie wrong, but it was something along those lines, right? So, anywho, you hear the term shift left. Look, I actually shifted left. You hear the term shift left. Yeah, you've heard that, sure? Is anybody tired of hearing that term, shift left? Maybe. Maybe some hands up in that area? Maybe. But guess what? It's everywhere, and I get it, but it works. Shifting left actually works, and I've got the numbers to prove it, which I'll show in just a moment. So for those that may be unfamiliar with the concept, and maybe not a lot of people here, but my mom's probably watching this, so I got to tell it. Shifting left refers to tasks that were traditionally done at the later stages of the development process and moving them to earlier stages. Now, the concept actually started with testing, but what we're going to talk about, though, is shifting security, vulnerability scanning more to the left. Remember, securing our code is one of those big 3 things that we need to be experts on in order to stay competitive. So I mentioned numbers, and here they are. In one of our recent DevSecOps surveys sent out to our users, or sent out to a number of folks, we found that 74% of security professionals said they have shifted left or they plan to in the next few years. This is happening. This is real stuff. People are embracing this practice. And 71% of security professionals said that at least a quarter of all security vulnerabilities are being spotted by developers earlier in the process. That's actually up from 53% last year. Now, this shift left is driving a number of benefits across the software development lifecycle. Most notably, development, security, and operations teams are coming together instead of working in silos. Now, there's actually a pretty good show on Apple TV right now called Silo, and if you haven't seen it, it's actually pretty good. I like it. So if we're talking about that silo, good, thumbs up, buttercup, we're okay. But if we're talking about silos at work, boo, with a side order of yuck, because that's why we want to embrace DevSecOps so much. It breaks down those barriers. It allows for the flow of information between these teams. And further proving this out, the majority of respondents, by 53%, said that they're responsible for application security as part of a larger team, right? It's not just one group responsible. It's not just some developer or some security team across the wall that needs to do this. It's everybody working together to solve these particular problems. And this was actually up from 44% last year. So again, more and more people embracing this. Now, in some of the experiences I've heard from customers, they talk about security scanning, especially when done at the end of the process, taking hours to complete. Maybe some of your processes do this. And then, once something is found, there's a whole process for how to remediate this. So let's equate this to a video game. So you're on a main quest in a video game to develop your project, right? That's what you want to be doing. And then, bam, side quest comes along. Boom, another side quest comes along. They're fun to do, right? They pop up, but they distract you from the real mission. Issues get created. They put into a backlog. Emails are sent to you. You got to take time away to read and respond to this. Most of the time, the team has moved on from what they were doing to work on to other things already, right? So they got to stop and pivot and return to that work, which takes time away. Hopefully the person who was working on that is still there. Maybe they went on PTO. Hopefully they commented their issue so you know what their code, so they know what it was. How was the process done? Maybe, hopefully there's some consistency in how, what that code was done based on what you're doing, right? So all of this leads to increasing the friction of the process and adding more time, which in turn provides for a worse developer experience. So shifting left allows you to find your code issues sooner in the process, and by embedding security scans directly into the build pipeline, everyone becomes a winner. And as an added agile benefit here, if you want to actually be getting these results by scanning in much smaller chunks of work. So any vulnerabilities found are directly related to what just changed, and the developer then has instant access to know what was happening. You want to get that feedback sooner, essentially. So it didn't have to get sent across to someone else. An email didn't have to be sent to another person or another team. It didn't get triggered. It's all right there for the developer to remediate and to fix. It's basically your straight path back to the castle to get your mission rewards. And also, on a side note, AI is certainly helping here. because that can be built in because it can be utilized to explain these vulnerabilities in plain language. What does this vulnerability mean? How can I remediate this? This is something that we can have the developers take a look at and understand right away so they can make that fix so much sooner. So now we're cooking with that. All right. So I'll wrap up the security section by talking about one last thing. The average software application depends on more than 500 open source libraries or components. And it's not just enough that the developers write secure code. You also have to verify that the security of the libraries and the dependencies that you're bringing in are also secure, right? Attacks on the software supply chain, essentially the components and libraries and tools and processes that you use to develop, they're happening every day and they're getting very sophisticated, right? They're happening right now. So as a part of protecting your code, organizations need to be able to prove that the code they are producing is safe and secure. But we still shouldn't sacrifice the developer experience for this. Let the developers use the libraries that make sense for them. Make things easy for them. But scan those dependencies, as well. Make sure they're scanned. If a dependency is compromised, we want to know this right away. These types of scans should absolutely be added into the pipeline as well for a commit. And with so many components being used, the task of verifying the security of each and every one of these by development and security teams, it sounds impossible. That quick, that diagram up there shows, just how dependencies are all related or interrelated to one another. You have to know that all of those are secure. Now, if you know your Greek mythology, you may be thinking, David, this sounds like one of those impossible tasks that Aphrodite gave to Psyche. And you're right. Quick story here. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, has a son, Eros, otherwise known as Cupid, who falls for the most beautiful human ever, Psyche. Now, he actually poked himself with one of his own arrows when he was supposed to be making her fall in love with a pig, but that's a whole thing anyway. So, events happen, and Psyche ends up injuring Eros. Aphrodite, his mom, is the super jealous type, right? She hates that Psyche is so beautiful and doubly mad that she injured her son. So, she gives Psyche an impossible task of sorting through a heap of barley and peas and lentils and all these other seeds that she's just dumped on the ground in one big pile. And she says, if you can sort all of these seeds into their respective piles by sunrise, you can date my son, Eros. Well, Psyche is completely distraught, and she has no idea how she's going to do this. But she actually gets help from a bunch of ants, and together they get the task completed and all the seeds get sorted. Happily ever after, the end, Psyche and Eros get married. Great. So, what's the moral there? Why did I tell you that story? It's a stretch, but go with me here. The ants are the automated pipeline that gets the task done. She did not have to do everything herself. And the piles of seeds, those are the individual components that originally made up the larger heap that was on the floor, right, of everything mixed together. If one wanted to, one could easily then identify what materials made up that original pile that was on the floor. In the development world, we call this the software bill of materials, which is essentially an ingredients list showing all of the nested list of dependencies which are contained in your project. So you've no doubt heard a lot about this from the presidential executive order to improve America's cybersecurity. So to improve your developer experience, I guess you could get a bunch of ants to help you, or you could eliminate more friction in the developer process by having an easy-to-produce, necessary bill of materials, and you can show this to whomever is providing those tasks to you. Take that, Aphrodite. Now, we've talked about what makes a good experience. We've talked about the importance of security in that experience. Now let's talk about how we can improve it even more. Tools. We love them. We've been using them since we could walk upright. We have whole stores devoted to them, and it's the same goes for the software world. There are multiple tools for every part of the software delivery lifecycle. That's great, right? You need something to track issues? Boom, grab a tool. Need something to build pipeline? Boom, grab a tool. Need somewhere to store your code? Guess what? Boom, grab a tool. So with all these tools available, one would think, sweet, I could just go to the tool tree in the backyard, pluck something, and put it into the old tool belt and use it, right? Get the job done. One could think that, but I would caution them to the dangers of tool chain sprawl. Good news, I don't have any more Greek myths to equate to this, but I'm probably working on one. So, one of my favorite / eye-opening exercises that I've done in previous talks is to ask the crowd to raise their hand and to keep it up as I ask how many tools are in their respective tool chains, right? So, and then keep their hand, and then put their hands down when they get to their number. So hands usually start going down right around number 4, right? Okay, four tools in the tool chain. Someone usually, quote unquote, wins right around the 8 mark. With 8 tools in the tool chain, that's a lot. One time though, I had an attendee that kept his hand all the way up till 15. 15 tools in the tool chain to develop software. I don't even want to imagine the administration or onboarding or integrations and upkeep of a tool chain that large, right? There's some quotes about, large tool chains there, let alone the expense of licensing all of those tools in that particular tool chain. And on top of that, you've got the enemy of all production, context switching. Going back and forth between those tools is costly. Research actually shows us that it takes an average of 23 minutes to regain focus after you're distracted, because different parts, again, of the brain are activated every time you switch between tasks. And one more cautionary tale in relation to data and visibility is that everyone on the team needs some sort of data to help them, whether it be executives, team leads, or individual contributors. Now, with more and more tools in that process, it's going to get difficult to get that end-to-end visibility and show what may matter. So while it's wonderful that so many choices exist, but when folks are using like this thing like digital duct tape, as we call it, to wire up and push all these tool chains together, it can get unwieldy and ungovernable. I mentioned integrations earlier because you can imagine a scenario where one app in the tool chain needs to be updated. Now, in theory, all integrations of that application need to be retested every time there's an update. I'm sure you're all doing that with yours, right? But many companies find they need to cut corners, and as a result, they do not update all their applications, and the result is they find themselves exposed to vulnerabilities because they can't incorporate security fixes easily within this DIY or do-it-yourself DevOps approach. The numbers that you see here on the slide are from our DevSecOps survey I referenced earlier, and I should have told a little bit more about that. It was sent out to roughly 5,000 developers, security professionals, and operations teams. So you can see here that 85% have more than 2 tools, 2 to 10 tools within their tool chain. And shockingly, the number on the right, 40% stated that they spend a quarter to about half their time maintaining and integrating tool chains. Remember, earlier we talked about doing more with less, right? So if an organization is spending this kind of time, money, effort on maintaining tool chains, and they have less people or less resources to actually do this, how are they able to keep up with the demands of what they really should be doing? And finally, on the slide, you see the middle number, you'll see that almost 70% of respondents talked about consolidating, shrinking that tool chain. And we're going to talk about why that makes sense. But one of my favorite examples of shrinking or consolidating a tool chain is via an exercise. So if I can ask everyone to take out their phones. Some of you may be on your phones right now. That's totally fine. I get it. You don't have to hold them up or do anything with it. Just take it in your lap. That's fine. Now, if you wouldn't mind then going into your backpacks or your briefcases and taking out your cameras, right? Now, if you wouldn't mind taking out your calculators. Finally, if you could take out your full set of encyclopedias and even any maps you use to get here. So you should have like maybe a pile of things on your lap. But I'm guessing most of you only have one device on your lap right now, right? And if anyone actually has a set of encyclopedias, please come see me. You win the day, and we'll figure out how to get a backpack for you or something like that to carry it around. So what they've done, essentially, when we talk about that phone, is they've taken the number of point solutions that individually work just fine, but they've created a single user experience, a single platform, if you will, where you can use those tools you need in one place. The gains you get from this are enormous, right? You no longer have to switch between tools and see the benefits. I don't have to carry around a bunch of stuff. I can do everything in one place. You can actually do the same thing for your DevSecOps platform while still maintaining the security and agility needed to develop great software. So let's go ahead and wrap up now. The numbers that I'm showing, the numbers from our surveys are showing us that folks with too many tools, they want to consolidate. Having too many tools causes bottlenecks, extra cost, and friction and frustration. The platform approach enables a value stream-driven mindset. Now, that's a mindset essentially that shortens the time from idea to customer value, and it establishes a powerful flywheel of data collection and aggregation of that data. Now, the benefit of a value stream platform approach is the visibility across personas and the projects so that you can measure improvements and cycle time, gathering things like value stream analytics to show you how long it's taking to get through your entire process. And a platform approach unifies the entire experience so that companies can be faster than their competition. And finally, to bring everything together that we've talked about, let's look at what a typical workflow created in a single platform could look like. Now, this workflow that I'm showing, it even goes beyond some of the things we talked about today. It talks about things like planning and creating the software, integrating and verifying that, deploying and even monitoring that particular software. And the important thing to take away is that each of these steps in this process allows us to be more agile by tearing down the silos for better communication amongst the teams and the stakeholders. A single platform allows for everyone to know what's going on. And to maintain a security approach, your teams can then shift left and proactively identify the vulnerabilities earlier in this development lifecycle. This is going to save you time, it's going to save you energy, and it's going to prevent headaches related to release delays. Now, with this approach, you're moving fast, but you're moving safely and securely, and you're improving your overall experience. So you've all heard the term happy wife, happy life. Well, today I'm positioning happy developer, watch out competitor. So thank you so much for your time today. It has been a genuine pleasure of mine to be up here chatting with you and taking you through this topic. I'd like to leave you with 3 simple things. 1, secure your code and your supply chains. Attacks are imminent. 2, find software that's going to improve your communication amongst your teams, tearing down silos, removing friction makes for happier developers. And 3, read some Greek myths. You never know when you can use one as a bad analogy. I hope this has been a good experience for you, and if it has, please tell 5 people, and if it hasn't, keep it to yourself. Thank you very much.